Good evening, friends. This is Dan, and welcome to a special Halloween episode of Space by Storm. Tonight we'll be entering the realm of the haunted cosmos. So turn out the lights, put your phone in dark mode, and join us around the cosmic campfire as we share some spooky tales from space. We start tonight's journey with a mysterious visitor. In 2003, China launched their first taikonaut into space. Yang Liwei completed the momentous maiden flight on board the Chinese Shenzhou 5 spacecraft. Yang advised he could hear someone knocking on the body of the spaceship, which sounded like someone knocking an iron bucket with a wooden hammer. He said it neither came from outside nor inside the spaceship. Yang confessed he got a bit nervous and had a peek out the porthole, but failed to spot any explanation for the eerie knocks. While it may be tempting to suggest an unworldly visitor was trying to get inside the craft, in the years since the flight, scientists have suggested several possible explanations for the knocking. Some believe it was a result of expansion and contraction. Others suggested a change in capsule temperature could have caused air pressure differences inside the ship. Either way, hearing what sounded like an unexpected visitor knocking on your spacecraft door is a surefire way to set the hairs on the back of your neck standing on end. Our next spooky tale begins with the arrival of more alien visitors. In 2015, Major Tim Peake became the first official British astronaut to join the International Space Station, or ISS. There, he was part of a 6-month stint on board the orbiting laboratory. During that stay, he recalls that he once saw 3 lights moving in formation outside the station. Soon those 3 lights were joined by a 4th. Tim admits that he thought he was seeing UFOs in space, before he realized that he was actually seeing were droplets of urine. He said, "They were perplexing, until we realized what we thought were the faraway lights of alien spaceships were actually very close, small droplets." It turns out that what was happening was urine was leaking out of a Russian probe vehicle attached to the ISS. The drops were crystallizing instantly and reflecting the sunlight. What we were seeing was Russian urine. So not UFOs in the traditional sense, but perhaps urine floating objects would be more fitting. Our next tale of horror involves the living dead. In the blackness of space, there are thousands of active satellites around the Earth. However, among the living, there are also those satellites that are dead. 3,000 or so metal corpses silently circle our world. But not all things that are dead stay that way, and there are a few zombie satellites lurking in the void. A zombie satellite is a defunct satellite that suddenly begins communicating again after an extended period of inactivity. And while there is such things as graveyard orbits that satellite operators can park their end-of-life assets so they'll be out of the way, zombie satellites are not constrained to those orbits. These satellites are often in stable orbits, but are either partially or completely inoperable, preventing operators from communicating them consistently. One of these zombie satellites is the Transit 5B-5 satellite that was part of the Transit NavSat Navy Navigation Satellite System. This system was used to provide accurate location information to the Navy's Polaris ballistic missile submarines. Launched in December of 1964, Transit 5B-5 is the oldest satellite known to still transmit a signal. Here is a sample of its spooky and musical oscillations. The signal has a distinctive, almost musical sound that is the product of an old-style analog telemetry system. Considered dead for many years because its navigational systems failed just 19 days after launch, it still emits a telemetry signal on 136.658 MHz, as 5B-5 is nuclear-powered. Another zombie satellite that is roaming the skies is a satellite that the U.S. thought lost since 1967, but one that eerily came back to life and started transmitting again 50 years later. Lincoln Experimental Satellite 1, also known as LES-1, was a communication satellite launched by the United States Air Force in 1965. It pioneered many advanced technologies for the time, including the military's super high-frequency band. LES-1 was not successful after being placed in a suboptimal orbit. It ceased transmissions in 1967. Then, after almost 50 years of inactivity, Les One spontaneously resumed transmissions in 2012. Phil Williams, an amateur radio astronomer for Cornwall, was the first to retrieve a signal from Les One. Williams noticed a ghostly sound in the satellite signal, sparking some to believe it may have been hijacked by aliens trying to communicate with Earth. However, aliens aside, Williams thinks that a component failure caused the satellite's transmitter to start up again on 237 megahertz, although it can only work when the solar panels come into the light. Speaking of unearthly communications, the late 60s were a time of awesome space advances, culminating in America's landing on the moon. However, in our manned trips around the moon, we perhaps disturbed some space-dwelling spirits haunting the far side of our lunar friend. In 1969, Apollo 10 launched from Florida for the final test flight before the historic moon landing of Apollo 11 later that year. The crew of Commander Thomas Stafford, Lunar Module pilot Eugene Cernan, and Command Module pilot John Young orbited the moon. When they passed around to the far side, cut off from radio contact with Earth, the astronauts began hearing a strange sound they couldn't explain. A spooky and eerie transmission filled their radios. Described as a whistling sound akin to space music, the crew actively discussed it amongst themselves. Being almost 239,000 miles away from Earth and in a communication blackout due to the moon being between them and NASA, it was enough to get the crew to begin to wonder out loud regarding this ghostly transmission.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? You hear that? That whistling sound? Yeah. Richard. Yeah, it sounds like, outer space type music.
However, despite them calling it outer spacey, the crew were professionals, and they quickly went about their duties as Apollo 10 came around the moon and back into contact with Earth. NASA's explanation for this communication was that it must have been some sort of radio interference, rather than, well, aliens. Their radio technicians quickly advised that the noise resulted from interference between the lunar module and command module's VHF radios. So despite the eerie noises received by the crew, it appears it most definitely was not ghosts or aliens. Our final spine-chilling tale involves the mother of all nightmares, the swirling and devouring beast that is a black hole. They say in space no one can hear you scream, but this black hole moans into the void and into your soul as it consumes its next victims. NASA's Exoplanet Exploration Program captured the sound produced by a black hole, and it sounds like something more akin to scary spirits than stars. The sound waves were discovered in 2003, when researchers using NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory detected a pattern of ripples in the X-ray glow of a giant cluster of galaxies in the constellation Perseus. Listen now to the ghostly black hole send out its hungry moan amongst the swirling gas of the galaxy cluster. These ripples were pressure waves, some 30,000 light years across, and radiating outward through the thin, ultra-hot gas of the galaxy cluster. The team translated the pressure waves into the equivalent of musical notes. NASA has noted that it's a misconception that there is no sound in space. While most of space is a vacuum, a galaxy cluster has so much gas that they were able to pick up an actual sound. NASA did caution, however, that the sound waves recorded were amplified and mixed with other data to achieve an audible version. The real sound consisted of a frequency too low for humans to hear, the equivalent of a B-flat, some 57 to 58 octaves below the middle C note of a piano. So to make the sound audible to human ears, astronomers at Chandra remixed the recording and increased its frequency 144 to 288 quadrillion times higher than the original. So as you can see and hear, not everything is sunrises and diamond exoplanets in the universe. From skull-shaped asteroids to blood moons, from jack-o'-lantern-faced views of our sun to evil-looking nebula, there's more than meets the eye in the ever-expanding blackness of space. We conclude our special Haunted Cosmos episode with all of us at Space by Storm wishing you a happy Halloween. Thank you for watching this video. In July, I decided to take the plunge and start this YouTube channel. Space has always been my passion, and I'd love if you could support me by subscribing to my new channel and hit the bell icon for notifications. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter as well.